Hey folks, tonight we're stepping into the blistering, smoke-choked world of someone who quite literally forged the medieval age, the blacksmith. Now, forget every romantic slow-motion movie scene you've ever watched, sparks dancing like fireflies as the hero shapes a sword destined for legend. Because the truth, being a real medieval blacksmith wasn't some heroic training montage. It was relentless, filthy, bone-deep exhaustion that burned itself into your lungs and left scars you couldn't wash off. Before we get too far, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if this kind of raw, unsweetened history is your thing, and drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is right now. It always fascinates me to see just how far our little forge of stories really reaches. Alright, dim the lights. Let the distant hum of a fan fill the background, and let's step back together into a world of iron, ash, and heat. Imagine being born into this life, not into nobility, not onto a throne or in a castle, but into a soot-blackened family forge. Your crib stands next to an anvil. Your lullabies are the pounding of hammers and the hiss of molten iron plunging into water. From your very first breath, the smell of burnt metal settles into your clothes, your hair, your bones. By the time you can stumble across the dirt floor without tipping headfirst into the fire pit, you're already useful. At 6, you're no longer just a child. You're your father's apprentice. That's a generous title, really. It means unpaid assistant, the smallest hands always tasked with the dirtiest jobs. Your playground, a floor littered with nails, slag, and embers still hot enough to brand you for life. Your toys, rusty tongs too big for your grip, and a hammer twice the weight of your forearm. Other kids spend afternoons chasing chickens, daring each other to climb trees or skipping stones on the river. You, on the other hand, you learn by doing, and by not dying. The daily lessons are simple but painful. Guess how hot the metal is without losing a finger. Pump the bellows until your shoulders burn. Try not to cry when your father barks that you ruined another nail. Fun, in this world, isn't measured in laughter, but in those rare moments when the iron bends the way you wanted. Your father, the master blacksmith, isn't the gentle teacher type. His vocabulary is limited, mostly sighs, scowls, and the immortal command, hit it harder. His hands feel like knotty old oak, and every crease in his face is carved by years of smoke, taxes, and the weight of knowing he'll never be called Lord, only necessary. You learn by watching, by burning yourself and trying not to scream. You don't ask why, you don't complain. Questions earn you flying horseshoes or, worse, cold silence that can stretch for days. Holidays, a nice idea for people whose lives don't run on the heat of a forge. Because iron doesn't care that it's a festival, someone always needs a plow fixed, a gate latch forged, a nail straightened. And the forge doesn't stop for your birthday, your fever, or your blisters. Your reward isn't money, at least not yet. It's food that tastes of smoke, an occasional grunt of approval, and the chance to learn skills that might feed you when you're grown. But mostly, what you learn is endurance, the stubborn refusal to fall, no matter how many times the hammer misses its mark. By the time you're 10, your arms already carry buckets of water heavier than the family dog you barely remember. Your tunic smells of scorched wool and sweat older than you are. Your childhood, it doesn't disappear suddenly. It melts away slowly, drop by drop, in the heat that fills your lungs every day. Because here, childhood isn't a stage, it's just the short time before your back starts hurting forever. And in the forge, time itself feels different, not measured by sunrise or seasons, but by the rhythmic music of hammer against anvil, the hiss of water on red-hot iron, and the dance of embers around your feet. And this is only the beginning. As the years drag on, your hands start to forget softness. The skin thickens into calluses that crack in winter and burn in summer, splitting until you bleed black and red together, soot mixed with blood. By now, your back knows the shape of the anvil better than it knows a bed. The hammer feels less like a tool and more like a stubborn limb that refuses to leave your grip, even when your fingers cramp at night. At 14, you're no longer just a boy fetching buckets or sweeping ash. You've earned the right to strike real blows, to take glowing iron from the coals, place it on the anvil, and trust your arms to mold it before the heat dies. The heat is alive, your first real teacher. Blink and it punishes you. Metal cools too fast, cracks, or curls in ways no hammer can undo. Wait too long and you're staring at a lump of useless iron that mocks your effort. It's a brutal dance of seconds. The color of the glow, the feel under the hammer, the hiss in the water trough. No books teach this. Only scars and repetition until your muscles remember what your mind barely dares to question. Mistakes are costly, not just in metal wasted. Every wasted bar means coin your family doesn't have. Every horseshoe that cracks means a customer who walks away angry, maybe forever. So you learn to listen, not just with ears, but with palms and forearms and shoulders. The way the hammer rebounds tells you the iron's mood. The sparks, as they leap away, tell you if it's ready to bend or likely to break. Iron teaches patience, but only after it teaches pain. And pain becomes routine. Burns from tongs too hot to notice in the rush. Bruises from hammers slipping off target in sweat-slick hands. Eyes red from smoke so thick you taste it long after you leave the forge. Your clothes reek. Sour sweat, coal dust, and old wool scorched. So often it smells like regret itself. At night, you wash your arms in water turned black before the dirt even leaves your skin. Sleep comes quickly. The sleep of exhaustion, not peace. Dreams, when they visit, smell of smoke and echo with the ring of iron on stone. By now, the forge is more home than any room with a bed. The anvil's chipped face feels familiar as your own reflection in the rare polished shield. The walls, stained and cracked, carry memories no one else sees. The first time your hammer stroke rang true, the burn scar you hid for weeks, the night your father slapped your shoulder instead of scolding. Each scar on your hand has a date, a lesson, a failure turned memory. But even as you grow stronger, the forge never becomes gentle. Its heat never feels like warmth, only demand. Its rhythm never becomes music, only duty. You're not shaping iron, you're fighting it until it yields. And every morning, the iron waits to remind you that yesterday's victory means nothing today. By the time you reach adulthood, the hammer no longer feels heavy, your arms thicken, your shoulders round with the memory of 1,000 swings. Villagers nod when they pass your forge, the silent respect reserved for someone whose work holds the town together more than its walls. UVA earned the right to your own tools. A hammer worn to the shape of your grip, tongs blackened, and pitted but balanced in your palm like an old friend. Your name might even travel, whispered at market stalls, spoken by merchants who remember a blade that didn't chip, a plowshare that turned soil smoother than expected. Yet for every nod of respect, new burdens arrive. The guild sends men to collect dues. The Lord Steward comes for taxes, eyes already calculating what might be hidden in the back of the forge. A passing knight demands repairs done by dawn, with payment promised at his return, which might never come. Iron doesn't argue, people do. Customers bargain hard, their voices sharp with worry. A broken hinge could keep livestock penned, or leave them vulnerable to thieves or wolves. A cracked horseshoe might lame an animal worth more than a family's yearly harvest. Every job is urgent, every job personal. Each nail carries weight unseen by outsiders. The hope that this gate won't fall in the next storm, that this plow will bring food to children's bowls, and mistakes. Now they're your mistakes alone. No master to absorb the blame. Every flaw, every misjudged heat, every cracked blade costs more than metal. It chips at trust built one horseshoe at a time. Then come the nights when the forge still glows after dusk, your breath white in cold air as hammer rings against anvil long after others sleep. The glow paints your arms in ghostly red, sweat dripping from brow to coals that sizzle in quiet accusation. You work until muscles tremble and eyes blur, because tomorrow's promise of coin depends on iron that one T-weight. And still, even mastery can't soften the forge's demands. The heat ages skin before its time. Wrists ache on damp mornings. Knuckles swell, stubborn to bend. A cough clings after years of coal smoke, scratching lungs that never seem to clear. Your clothes never lose the black streaks, your nails never scrub clean. The smell of burnt wool, sweat, and iron becomes so constant that silence smells wrong without it. Yet among the smoke and the grind, moments of quiet triumph appear. The perfect curve of a finished blade, the surprised smile of a farmer whose tool feels balanced in hand, the nod from an elder who's seen dozens of smiths come and go. Small victories, often unnoticed beyond the forge door, but yours. Over time, the forge doesn't just shape your arms or bend your spine, it carves your thoughts. You start seeing the world in lines and curves, in the grain of iron, and the way it yields or refuses. A broken hinge isn't merely broken, it tells a story of flawed heat, rushed hammer strikes, or metal too thin to last. A cracked blade becomes a question. Was the steel cooled too fast, or was it never true to begin with? Every problem becomes something to be worked, reworked, or reforged, until it fits, or fails for good. Even outside the forge, the habits remain. A spilled bucket isn't just water lost, it's weight, balance, wasted effort. Rain becomes not just wetness, but rust creeping unseen into iron left outside. Wind isn't only cold air, but fuel for flames if channeled right, or death to embers if ignored. You run calloused fingers over every new thing, testing heft and balance by instinct before thought, and so the blacksmith's eyes see what others pass by. The gate hinge worn shiny on one side, warning of a coming break. The plow's edge catching light unevenly, hinting at soil too hard for next season's harvest. The way a customer holds a hammer, wrist tense, grip wrong, telling you how it'll crack the next handle. Iron teaches you to respect weakness, not scorn it. A flaw ignored becomes failure. A flaw understood can be worked around, strengthened, hidden, or even turned into something useful. But these lessons come at cost. Your nights fill with dreams of half-shaped blades and flames that won't catch. You wake to phantom burns, palm tingling where no coal has touched in hours, and the world, once open and wide, feels always weighed against the forge. Will this storm ruin the iron waiting to cool? Will tomorrow's orders leave enough coin for winter charcoal? Will your back hold another season of lifting and swinging? Yet in those rare, quiet moments, you see more than just work. The dance of sparks in the dark becomes beautiful. A brief, defiant constellation under a smoky roof. The rhythm of hammer and bellows turns almost like music. Your music, carved from labor. The warmth at dawn as fire catches on coals saved from last night feels closer than any prayer, because in the end, the forge doesn't only consume, it gives back. Scars that become pride, knowledge that outlives the body, and a stubborn, burning patience the kind needed to face iron days, and life itself. One day, without quite noticing when it began, the hammer starts to feel heavier. The same strokes that once rang out like a steady drumbeat now leave your shoulder burning before noon. Your breath comes shallower, ragged with old smoke and years of winter mornings spent too close to damp coal. The anvil, once your partner, feels suddenly tall, its face reflecting not just iron and sparks, but the lines deepening around your eyes. The forge's heat, once familiar as heartbeat, starts to bite in new ways. Where once it felt like fuel, it now feels like test. Skin that burns quicker, sweat that stings in places once hardened. You find yourself wiping your brow more often, pausing to stretch a back that no longer forgives a careless bend. And in those pauses, memories press in. The first nail you shaped straight, the first blade a customer praised, the child you taught to hold a hammer whose name you might barely remember now. Tools worn smooth by your hands become relics, not yet useless, but whispering that your time holding them is nearing its end. A younger smith might work beside you, his swing faster, his laughter easier. You catch yourself correcting him, then stopping, remembering how it felt to have older voices over your shoulder. You speak less, but see more. Where he sees glowing metal, you see the history of every heat and quench, every mistake waiting unless patience slows the hand. At night, sleep feels different too. The ache in your wrists and knuckles hums in the dark. A quiet reminder of years measured not in birthdays, but in sparks and seasons. Dreams sometimes return you to a forge that feels lighter, louder, where your arm never tires, and every blow lands true. And yet, the forge still draws you each dawn. You walk slower to the coals, breathe deeper before bending to stir them alive. The fire greets you with the same flare of red and gold, uncaring of your years, demanding only that you keep feeding it. Because in this trade, respect isn't granted by age alone. It's earned each day the anvil rings back your intent. Each time the iron bends because your hand still knows how. The day will come when the hammer grows too heavy, when your fingers tremble too much to hold tongs steady, when listening to the hiss of quenching water feels like memory rather than work, and you will lay the hammer down, not in defeat, but in recognition. But you were always part of something larger, a cycle older than your years. And in that quiet moment, the forge around you feels less like a workplace and more like an old companion. The cracked stone walls that watched your first awkward blows, the soot-darkened beams that shook with every swing, the anvil whose face caught not only sparks, but every frustration, every triumph, every prayer you dared not speak aloud. Your fingers, stiff now, will trace the grooves left by decades of hammer strikes, each scar in the iron an echo of a season survived. A drought endured, a winter outlasted. The walls hold stories no tongue remembers, laughter shared with an apprentice now long gone, curses muttered in the hush before dawn, a whispered thanks to the fire when a blade finally took shape after days of stubborn resistance. You'll notice the dust motes floating in late light, turning the forge into something softer than you recall, as if the very air remembers every spark that ever rose and died here. Tools once gripped so tight will sit quietly at your side. waiting not for you, but for the next hand brave or foolish enough to lift them. And as you draw your last breath within those walls, you'll find that your thoughts drift not to the failures, nor even the proudest pieces you forged, but to the simplest acts. The hinge that kept a door from slamming in winter winds, the nail that held a roof steady over a newborn child, the plowshare that turned frost-hardened earth into food for hungry mouths. Because the forge taught you that greatness isn't cast in gold, but hammered patiently into everyday things that quietly keep a village alive. And you'll realize your true legacy never sat on noble belts or royal gates, but in the unnoticed, honest iron that bore life's weight without fanfare. In those final heartbeats, you'll remember the sound of the hammer's ring in the hush before dawn, a sound that once woke neighbors, warned the village that work had begun, and comforted them that someone still faced the fire, even when hope felt thin. You'll remember the smell of rain on cooling coals, the warmth of forged stone under tired palms, the taste of sweat mixed with soot, and how somehow all of it felt like belonging. And when you finally step away, it won't be with sorrow, but with a quiet pride, that for all the years the world asked your strength, your patience, your stubborn will, you answered that the iron bent, cracked, and sometimes refused, but you never stopped returning to the heat. And that even if your name fades from ledger and memory, your work lives on in unseen hinges, rusting gates, and quiet prayers spoken under roofs your nails helped hold. Because that is what it means to be a blacksmith. To shape not glory, but endurance. To leave behind not monuments, but usefulness. To stand, hammer in hand, against time itself, knowing you will lose, yet striking anyway. And in the end, perhaps that is enough. And in the silence that follows, you find there's a different kind of ringing. Not the bright, sharp clang of hammer on iron, but a gentler echo that lives behind your ribs, pulsing with each slow breath. It's the memory of thousands of strikes, each one forgotten by the world, yet living in the grain of your bones. You remember days when your strength felt endless, hauling bellows at dawn, lifting iron bars heavy as hope itself, laughing at blisters because tomorrow's work waited either way. And you remember nights when the forge's glow felt less like a prison and more like a lantern in dark times, when coin was thin, roofs leaked, and illness shadowed the village, yet fire still burned, stubborn and bright, because the fire never judged, never pitied, never lied. It simply demanded, then revealed who you were by what you chose to shape. Over the years, you learned truths no sermon could teach, that nothing holds forever, but what is made with care lasts longer than pride. That even the strongest iron weakens if cooled too quickly, and so to do hearts, that to shape anything worth keeping, you must first withstand your own mistakes. In the forge, time felt different. Seasons announced themselves in cold deliveries, the shift of daylight on the anvil, the smell of rain steaming from hot stone. Your own aging felt less like loss and more like patina, skin darkened by smoke, hands roughened not by ruin but by years spent creating. Outside, the world kept changing. New lords, new taxes, new wars whispered in markets. But inside, the ritual stayed. Heat, hammer, quench, repeat, as old as breath itself. And you came to understand. The forge was never only a place of work. It was a mirror, reflecting each triumph and every hidden doubt in the curve of steel and the lines of your palms. Now, as the hammer grows too heavy and breath too short, you see the truth that youth could not. That every mark you left on iron left a matching mark within you. That in shaping tools, hinges, blades, you shaped patience, humility, and a quiet kind of faith. Faith not in kings or priests, but in the simple promise that what is made with honest sweat can outlast the one who made it. And so, when the forge finally cools and darkness claims its corners, you do not leave in sorrow, because what mattered most was never the heat, the sparks, or even the iron. What mattered was returning each day, tired, bruised, but willing, and striking again. Because the work deserved it. And when someone unknown lifts a gate you once fitted, swings a hammer you once forged, or rests under a roof held by your nails, they carry a quiet echo of your life, a life spent not in glory, but in the slow, steady alchemy of turning raw, stubborn metal into something that served, that sheltered, that endured. And perhaps, in the end, that's all any of us can hope to leave behind. Not monuments of stone, but use, not fame, but memory folded into everyday things. A proof that even the hardest life, faced with open hands and patient heart, can leave behind warmth enough to outlive the final ember. Long after the fire's last breath has cooled to dust, the forge stands silent, cobwebs lace the rafters, rust blooms where once hands moved daily in rhythm, Yet somehow, it doesn't feel abandoned, only resting, as if waiting for the ring of a hammer to wake its old bones. Outside, seasons roll forward. Children, whose laughter once drifted past the open door, now walk with stooped backs, telling grandchildren of the smith who worked from dawn's first mist to dusk's last glow. They speak not in grand tales of heroism, but in quieter stories. How he fixed a broken plow on the eve of planting, saving a harvest. How his forge burned through the harshest winter. A place where the desperate warmed hands and found courage to keep walking home. How his silence could weigh as heavy as iron, yet his few words, when given, were carried for years like charms. Around the village, traces of him linger, disguised as everyday things. A gate still swinging true despite storms. A latch that clicks shut each night with a sound so familiar its owners no longer hear it. A blackened horseshoe nailed above a doorway, meant to keep away misfortune, yet really keeping alive the memory of the hands that shaped it. Time softens even iron, but these quiet remnants resist forgetting, not because they are perfect, but because they were made honestly, shaped by sweat and stubbornness, by bruised knuckles and patience that outlasted anger. They are small proofs that a life's worth need not be measured by grand monuments, but by usefulness that endures long after the maker is gone. At the forge's hearth, where coals once glowed bright enough to blind, dust now lies undisturbed, yet sometimes, at dawn or dusk, a shaft of light catches on the old anvil, and for an instant it gleams as though remembering the countless sparks that once danced there. If someone new should step inside, brush aside cobwebs, and set coals alight again, they won't begin alone. They'll start where the last hand left off, guided by worn tools, by the ghost of rhythm engraved into the anvil's face, by stories lingering in the very air. And though the name of the smith may fade from record, the shape of his work in iron, in memory, in habit, taught from father to son, remains. Because in the end, this is the quiet truth the forge teaches, that to create is to defy forgetting. That the warmth we leave in the world, though it may cool, outlives us in ways we rarely see. And that even the roughest hands can leave behind something that softens another's burden. So the hammer rests, the fire sleeps, and the door hangs slightly ajar. Yet in hinges that hold, in gates that open, in tools still balanced in calloused palms, his story lives on, not in fame but in function, not in song but in service. And sometimes, that is the most enduring legacy of all. And so, what remains when the hammer is set aside for the last time, not just tools, not only scars, but something deeper, a life measured in blows that shaped not only iron, but patience, hope, and quiet dignity. In every spark that once leaped from anvil to air, there lived a promise, that stubbornness can become craft, that mistakes can become lessons, and that even the hardest work carries warmth if struck with care. The forge taught that nothing, not even iron, stays unbroken forever. But what matters is the hand that lifts the hammer again after failure, the will that returns to heat and noise when comfort whispers to rest. And perhaps that is what endures longest of all, not the iron itself, destined one day to rust and crumble, but the courage to keep shaping it anyway. A kind of hope born each dawn in a cold forge, reignited by tired hands willing to face heat one more time. Because in the end, the true legacy of the blacksmith is not what he made, but how he chose, every day, to keep making. To turn raw resistant metal into something that served. To turn hours of sweat into hinges, gates, and tools that held lives together. To find meaning not in praise or riches, but in the quiet weight of honest work. And long after the last ember cools and his name slips from memory, his story remains written in simpler, sturdier things. A latch that still clicks shut, a nail that still holds, a gate that still opens to morning light. Proof that what we forge with care can outlast even the hands that made it. And that sometimes, to have shaped something useful, steady, and true, is enough to leave the world softer, stronger, and still turning after we are gone.